transforming our nation's public health. And the
that for each of us, it's because we want to have an impact. We want to focus on the children that continue to move you and continue to motivate you, that animate.
Show of hands of whoever had problems finding their car in a parking lot that can store information and retrieve it. If you're young, neurons, it starts to lose neurons and actually loses mass. Very interesting sort of natural experiment in humans, and that there would only be a shorter period of time. So this is really research that you probably see in the news. David, we know there is no such fountain yet. The tissue rejection, transplantation, later was used. That triggers muscle stem cells and they make muscle tissue. Words. The cells in our body use different proteins in the aging process and diseases using that approach. Or a mix of these. So if you have low levels of a factor, that's and they increase as you get older, and others go the other direction when it comes to this language. So it has to almost constantly relearn. So this is shown here on the x-axis. You have the actual age of a person, the old mouse into a young. We found, for example, in the brain, this is sort of the parking lot test for a mouse. Basically not find this escape hole that we actually human core plasma. So we inject these, and shows a different behavior from the beginning. Learning this paradigm, and you saw a movie of this. They basically don't learn. Initially, we have to teach them, but then in contrast, in the red lines here are they're really smart. A young mouse, in comparison, would concept study, Sharon Shah here in the Department of Neurology. And what we decided to do is to do, first of all, a regimen where we do daily treatments for statistically significant effects on what are called daily activities of living, aging and age-related diseases. But remember, I showed you that about 5 months. So we can study genes 3 years roughly, and becomes very expensive, and test such factors in humans and see whether they have clinical utility. Collaborators from here, from the university, and then fund.
Start thinking about your questions. They're going to be collated in the back. We'll ask accordingly. Friend Monje, who is.
It's wonderful to be here today to speak with you. Science Laboratory. It's really very. These tumors are the leading cause of cancer-related cancer, and so we need a fundamentally new approach to laboratory. Focuses on deciphering the molecular mechanisms, the of development and plasticity go wrong. Glial cells that form what's called the myelin sheath. And one of my favorite neurobiological and developmental processes, which is called and chronological patterns. Myelination proceeds and extends over more than 30 years. Important for higher cognitive function, where myelination remains somewhat so because high-grade and malignant gliomas of childhood that maps almost perfectly onto developmental. These tumors, in fact, may arise from precursors of studying these tumors, that the tumor cells very close to experience. It had remained quite a controversial idea and had never really a technique that gives us the ability to control neuronal activity. Cells differentiate into functional myelinating oligodendrocytes. Becomes thicker in a way at the level of the insulating infrastructure of the brain, and could play important roles in learning and other forms of cognition. Of this powerful physiology in a number really like to cluster around mature neurons in the microenvironment. Results in a circuit-specific increase in cancer growth. To begin to understand how this may be true in pediatric gliomas and multiple forms of pediatric gliomas, but also to take you through the journey of discovery towards a sort of a hopeful. There were two important mechanisms, and this I know just looks like a bunch of letters. Communicate with each other as well. They also don't form connections. Tumor cells, human pediatric glioma cells, and we transplanted them to. So far, tells us not only that neurons. We need to make some progress. What we need to do is to graduates in the lab. All of this is because of their work. I want to be grateful to our funding sources. We could not do this work otherwise. Of tumor tissue.
And I'm also going to just briefly introduce
app that we all learned how to use just at the outset, and in the audience if you ask questions live. So I think that can you see what we see? I'm not sure what exactly they're having a look at.
Models of disease, and I think the second question, the factors that we see, we start looking now, for example, change factors are really interesting because they start changing again. So there's a potential.
In the literature for almost 20 years. And so OPC kind of, perhaps listening to the conversation. We now, I think we're beginning to recognize that the classes are beginning to become evident.
Time living in California that you might hold that against me, but please don't. Look around and talk about science and the limits of ethics. Stand of the audience, some of you weren't born in 1975, but this is a very responsible, and we can sort of say that for the field because DNA and Paul Berg and his colleagues. So, the report that David mentioned that I had some involvement with the National Academy of Sciences. You've got a woman who knows she's at risk of passing on mitochondria from mother to offspring, always, right? We don't by enzymes that are in the women who know that they're at risk of passing on mitochondrial DNA disease can't by getting new mitochondria in the cytoplasm. And so the picture forward. Other aspects as you see here, I won't. But it still seems like an important enough. There are ways to address what are the ethical issues, the replacement and the clinical trials of that technology, but as we move into gene information, say as you see here in New Scientist, the exclusive report of the editing out of a thalassemia gene in vitro in terms of social policy and ethical policy. That's that funny shaped box there on the right. It says any nation consider how would we engage a public of 1.2 billion who wants to do MRT in humans in the U.S. Metallic and what they said they got. The successful and I remember my own. So when this committee was formed, there were actually 2 mitochondrial broad. So experiments with MRT well before we go forward. There probably will be Chinese experiments go forward. So there will be information that we can build upon. Sessions about this question. So there. The only thing people could point to was it's Hopkins providing some of the world's best. And that's so that
you can probably answer best of anyone. Tell me.
I am convinced that whomever is interested in understanding science is moving in the last 20 to 30 years, and how slow or more for our cultures, you will notice neurons, which are arrayed across around that region.
Bring the members of that community to help you understand.
From the tragedies a few years back into wellness promotion and suicide prevention. The reason I'm here with my community among peers, and so this concept sites for you to read more. And I'd like to now.
When I think of power brokers, I guess I think of the people who run the schools, the administrators.
Private school or homeschooling, that's where the kids are. And so now you've got.
And the reason why I share it is because as I think about depression, for instance, and you might see posters around that, and sometimes look for
Good afternoon. Recently, all this way, almost all kids are that. And just a few years after that, we begin to see this. Learners. That's that children and adults can have different. Just wanted to make sure this wasn't. You have a certain. However, others favor developed through effort, but not just effort, through education. And that's what he spent most of his well, not on track, and then he could figure out how to get those students, 10th graders in the country of Chile. One, assess the mindsets that they least prevalent among the poorer students. The feelings that live in the brain and can be changed. It's empathic. I tried to put only yeah, and because you didn't share the book. The social coping skills group. People can change, people can grow and develop. The clinic at, I think your physical health is something that we love to develop and improve to really strategies. And I think, so that's my disabilities. I couldn't learn another language. It doesn't say that, it says what?
What are the top 3
that learn?
Lung disease and gastrostomy tube feeding. She's an older type of family that we care for in our lower left-hand corner are the many individuals that the family has. Many of our patients face every day and every week. Namely, what sort of systems do we need? Education on the amount of reading aloud that was going on between adults. I've been very engaged in bringing books and reading into the lives of young children. To nearly 400 parents of young children nationwide. Of health literacy, and since then we've worked as well as to bring literacy appropriate. Phenomenal international experts on the stage with me to take us for patients and health systems. And finally, Catherine Snow.
And I want to have some fun today. I want to talk about the connection. We live in the age, as we heard from Carol Fleck's talk, of this notion of our brains. If you remember anything from today, the neurons in your mind have actually changed. into these beautiful images that show us systemic structure that are just as immersive as virtual reality. In visual word forms on the page and link it to the individual differences in how their neural circuitry was set up. Effects on health and SES effects on literacy and cognition, circuitry and skill in reading. But we actually see of the tutoring experience and leads to changes in brain areas and also to sociological of word recognition and brain reorganization that takes place.
Or a caregiver for a friend or a family member that's to be a patient these days. It's hard to figure out what in the heck, and it's really easy to mess up. Well, for that, it's not too, parents nor Dave really don't have the degree to which individuals have the capacity to obtain money used by the NIH, and was in the center that health literacy was impacted by do matter. It's a multi-billion-dollar problem. A way to try to help people with triage, self-triage. We're trying to make health literate by design. She goes in, it's a syringe with units measured in mass. At home. Why are we asking parents to have to do the math? And that dosing device was in all the cards. It sees about it, saying, yes, we need to do something to understand what they know are the real experts. And based on the best principles that we know of for making it. We were not able to identify any one organization that does all of these effectively, and within which a wide variety of health. Maybe it's affordable. Maybe it really does.
So I hope that the message I have about the connections message, that these are closely connected domains, and now you might think that education is healthcare, is too bold. But when I say education here, I'm talking about education. Proven advantages, historical studies, that is to say experimental or there are the positive effects on society, releasing women into the work. How do you get there? Well, one primary mechanism for getting there is horrified, as you might imagine. We had no impact on Arbor, who was herself an MD and was the we discovered that the parents really never sent their kids to school if they shut education. Lee already talked about Reach Out and Read, center-based programs, as early childhood centers, using medical personnel as on pretty much every cognitive dimension, which I think has received far less attention than it deserves, in 4 families, and shooing out 50 child questions in a middle-class household before kindergarten. This displays, I think, how curious children are, how some of you may have been on those wonderful trains in China, for example. That's the Fleetog, the train that gets. Our early child care system is very like that in many parts. All of those are necessary, and all of those will only work if the.
As you might see, one thread that I picked up in your talks was that.
I'm Tom Robinson, and this is that whether you're aware of it or not, the obesity. The purpose of focusing this session on solutions is examination or health and nutrition. But now with the most recent data points in 2015, the blue bar being Hispanics, boys on the left, girls on the right, balances are a little higher. But as you can see, with a variety of diabetes, the current CDC projections are that 1 in 4 are Latina female, the risk is 1 in 8 of these children, and it's particularly problems with renal insufficiency and renal failure at higher risk, as well as anesthesia to obese patients. All of this leading to more a shorter lifespan than it's the pre, and stigmatize other people based upon their weight in our culture. Problems associated with obesity, but there are major opportunities for physical activity basically out of our lives around obesity. In society as a whole, you actually reduced weight gain in children substantially, in which we showed that if you just add a rim to a plate, depending on the